Everyone online will tell you rent under $500 is a myth, like Bigfoot or a calm HOA meeting. They'll say that doesn't exist anymore. What they really mean is it doesn't exist where influencers live. Because while TikTok is fighting over $2,300 studios with character, there are still towns in America where rent is cheaper than your monthly grocery bill. And no, they're not all haunted, radioactive, or actively sinking into the earth. This list exists because no one talks about these places on purpose. They don't trend. They don't brand themselves. They don't have a neon sign that says, "Remote workers welcome." And that silence, that's the discount. We're talking towns where landlords still answer the phone, neighbors recognize your car, and $500 doesn't get you a corner of a room. It gets you the whole thing. Walls, doors, sometimes even a porch. But don't get it twisted. Every one of these places has a catch, a vibe, a personality quirk that explains the price. Stick around because some of these towns are shockingly livable, and others will make you say, "Yeah, okay, now I get why it's cheap." Like the video if your rent hurts your feelings. Subscribe if Zillow has personally wronged you. Let's start with a town the internet forgot existed. Number 1, Cairo, Illinois. Let's start strong with a town that looks like it time-traveled from 1978 and decided to stay there out of spite. In Cairo, Illinois, it's still very possible to find rent under $500. Not shared bathroom, landlord lives in the walls, under $500. I'm talking about full apartments, doors that close, kitchens where the stove has seen things but still works. Cairo sits at the southern tip of Illinois, right where the Ohio and Mississippi rivers meet. Geographically, it's important. Economically, we'll get there. At its peak, Cairo had over 15,000 people. Today, it's hovering closer to everyone knows everyone's business, and that population drop is the entire reason rent is so low. When people leave faster than houses can disappear, landlords stop dreaming big. They just want someone to pay on time and not punch holes in the drywall. Industry-wise, this used to be a river and railroad powerhouse. Now, think government jobs, local services, a few small employers, and a whole lot of used to. Which sounds depressing until you realize that quiet economies come with quiet costs. Living in Cairo feels like the volume knob is permanently turned down. No traffic, no lines, no one rushing you at the grocery store because there is no rush. The loudest sound most days is the wind hitting old buildings like it's trying to remind them they're still standing. Weather? Hot summers, cold winters, wind that doesn't flirt, it attacks. Animals? More stray cats than Starbucks locations. Shopping? If you're addicted to Target runs, you're going to suffer. If you're fine planning ahead, you'll survive. And here's the emotional whiplash. Cairo is cheap, quiet, and oddly peaceful, but also visibly worn. Empty buildings, historic homes waiting for someone to care again. It's not dangerous chaos, it's neglect fatigue. This is not a town for people chasing vibes. It's a town for people chasing margin. If your goal is to reset financially, breathe, and live without rent panic every month, Cairo makes a disturbing amount of sense. And yes, now you understand why it's under $500. Number 2. Clarksdale, Mississippi. Clarksdale is the kind of town where rent is under $500 and the air casually carries the history of American music. Like it's no big deal. Yes, that Clarksdale. The one tied to blues legends, crossroads mythology, and enough musical lore to fill 3 documentaries and at least one guy at a bar who swears he knows the real story. And somehow, despite all that cultural weight, rent here is still shockingly cheap. We're talking apartments in the $400 to $500 range that are not theoretical. Real listings, real keys, real landlords who don't ask for your blood type, and a 780 credit score just to reply to an email. Clarksdale sits in the Mississippi Delta, surrounded by flat farmland that stretches so far your sense of depth perception gives up. Population hovers around 14,000, and it hasn't been in a hurry to grow, that's the secret. When a town isn't sprinting toward revitalization, prices don't sprint either. Economically, Clarksdale runs on a mix of healthcare, education, agriculture, tourism, and quietly music. Not influencer tourism. Actual people who come for festivals, museums, and live shows where musicians play like rent isn't due tomorrow. Why is it so cheap? Because jobs don't pile up here. Because it's hot. Because it's rural. Because the town never got picked as the next it place and never asked to be. Living here feels slow in a way that's either deeply calming or mildly terrifying, depending on your personality. The pace of life is unbothered. Nobody's networking. Nobody's pretending to be busy. Time stretches out like it forgot it was supposed to move. Weather check. Summers are humid enough to make your soul sweat. Winters are mild, which almost feels like an apology. Animals? Mosquitoes that deserve their own zip code. Shopping. You will learn to plan. Impulse shopping is not supported here. The vibe is complicated in a way that's hard to explain but easy to feel. There's pride. There's history. There's also visible struggle. Empty storefronts next to places that have been open longer than most cities on the West Coast. And here's the twist. If you work remotely, or you're retired, or you're rebuilding, Clarksdale can actually be nice, affordable, human, grounded. It's not flashy, it's not trendy, but it's real, and it's rent under $500 real, which is exactly why most people scroll past it, and exactly why it made this list. Number 3. Beckley. West Virginia Beckley is what happens when a town quietly minds its business, while the rest of the country loses its mind over rent. This is one of those places where you read the listing twice because your brain refuses to believe the number. Yes, that's $450. Yes, that's the whole apartment. No, it's not a scam. It just exists. Beckley sits in southern West Virginia, tucked into the Appalachian Mountains like it's trying to avoid eye contact with the rest of America. Population floats around 16,000, which means it's big enough to have actual infrastructure, but small enough that nobody's discovering it on social media anytime soon. Historically, this was coal country. That's important because when an industry leaves, housing doesn't magically disappear with it. Jobs go, people go, houses stay, rent drops. That's the brutal math behind why places like Beckley are still affordable. Today, the economy runs on healthcare, education, government services, and a handful of local employers. It's not booming, it's not collapsing, it's just steady, like a town that clocked out emotionally and decided stress was optional. Living in Beckley feels slower in a way that sneaks up on you. The roads are quiet. The stores aren't frantic. No one's rushing you through anything because there's nowhere they urgently need to be. Weather-wise, winters can be cold, but not Midwest punishment cold. Summers are mild enough that you don't feel personally attacked when you step outside. The mountains keep things cooler, quieter, and a little moody in a brooding novel way, not a horror movie way. Animals? Deer will absolutely judge you from the side of the road. Infrastructure? Solid but dated. Nothing fancy, everything functional. Shopping, you've got what you need. Not what you want if your wants include boutique oat milk. Now let's address the obvious question. Why is it this cheap? Because the job market isn't competitive. Because young people leave. Because it's rural. Because it doesn't pretend to be something it's not. And that honesty is the charm. Beckley isn't trying to sell you a lifestyle, it's offering you breathing room. The kind where rent doesn't dominate your thoughts. Where your paycheck isn't instantly vaporized by housing. If you're remote, semi-retired, or just tired of playing financial defense every month, Beckley makes an uncomfortable amount of sense. It's not exciting, it's not aspirational, but it is calm. And under $500 calm hits different. Now you see the pattern forming. Number 4, Hannibal, Missouri. Hannibal is one of those towns that sounds fictional until you realize it's been quietly existing longer than most modern cities, and charging rent like it knows a secret. Yes, that Hannibal. Mark Twain's hometown, white picket fences, river views, old houses with personalities, and somehow, apartments still hovering around the $400–500 range, like inflation forgot to stop here. Hannibal sits along the Mississippi River in northeastern Missouri, with a population just under 18,000. It's big enough to feel like a real town, small enough that no one's pitching it as the next creative hub. And that's exactly why rent hasn't lost its mind. The local economy runs on healthcare, manufacturing, education, tourism, and a steady drip of visitors who come for the literary history and leave before asking about housing prices. Tourism money comes in, but it doesn't distort the rental market because tourists don't stay long and remote workers haven't discovered it yet. Why is it still cheap? Because Hannibal is stable, not explosive. Because wages are modest. Because the town values preservation over reinvention. And because no one here is trying to impress anyone else. Living in Hannibal feels grounded. Like the town is permanently in Sunday afternoon mode. Streets are quiet, people wave. Conversations are unhurried in a way that feels illegal if you've lived in a major metro recently. Weather check. Hot summers, cold winters, and spring floods that remind you the Mississippi is not a decorative feature, it's a personality. Animals, birds, squirrels, and the occasional raccoon acting like it pays rent too. Infrastructure? Old but sturdy. The kind of town where things don't look new, but they also don't randomly collapse. Shopping won't thrill you. Entertainment won't overwhelm you. But you won't feel financially hunted either. Here's the emotional curve. Hannibal feels charming, then a little sleepy, then reassuring. Then you realize you haven't checked your bank app in days, and that's when it hits. This is a town where rent doesn't dominate your mental bandwidth, where you can live alone without sacrificing food quality, where $500 still means something. The catch? Career acceleration is not on the menu. Nightlife is aspirational. And if you need constant stimulation, you'll get bored. Fast. But if you want peace, space, and rent, that doesn't feel like a personal attack. Hannibal quietly delivers. Which is exactly why it stays under the radar. And under 500. Number 5. Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Pine Bluff is the town that makes people nervous before they've even looked at the numbers, and then deeply confused once they do. Because yes, rent here can still fall well under $500. And no, it's not because the houses are cardboard or the streets are on fire. It's because Pine Bluff is a place with a reputation problem that prices never recovered from. Located in southeastern Arkansas, Pine Bluff sits about 45 minutes from Little Rock and has a population hovering around 39,000. That makes it one of the larger towns on this list and one of the cheapest, which already tells you something strange is going on. Historically, Pine Bluff was an industrial and agricultural hub. When manufacturing jobs left, the economy didn't fully reinvent itself. Population declined. Demand softened. Housing stayed. Rent dropped. Then the narrative stuck. That narrative is why it's cheap. Let's be honest. Pine Bluff gets labeled as dangerous online in a way that's lazy and outdated. Is crime a factor? In certain pockets, yes. Is the entire town a no-go zone? Not even close. Like most places, it's hyper-neighborhood dependent, but headlines don't do nuance. Living in Pine Bluff feels more urban than the other towns so far. You've got actual city blocks, proper grocery stores, fast food chains, hospitals, and infrastructure that doesn't feel like it's one power outage away from collapse. Weather-wise, hot, humid, southern, summer air that sticks to you like it's emotionally attached. Winters are mild enough to feel like a mercy. Animals? Stray dogs with side-eye, mosquitoes with ambition. Shopping, functional. You're not driving 2 hours for toothpaste. Here's the emotional whiplash. Pine Bluff feels normal in a way that contradicts the price. Streets with life, schools, churches, community events. It's not a ghost town, it's just underappreciated and underinvested. The reason rent stays low is perception plus income reality. Local wages aren't high, so rents can't be either. And when outside demand never arrives, landlords stay realistic. If you're remote, cautious, and willing to learn where not to live, Pine Bluff can be a financial cheat code. You can live alone, afford groceries, and still have money left over, which feels radical in 2026. The catch? You have to be comfortable trusting your own judgment instead of the internet's fear reflex. But if you can do that, Pine Bluff offers something rare: city-level convenience at small-town prices, and yes, still under $500. Number 6. Danville, Illinois. Danville is what happens when a town stops trying to impress anyone and accidentally becomes affordable. This is one of those places where listings feel almost rude. Like, why are you charging $475 for a 2-bedroom? Do you know what other cities are doing right now? Do you want to start a riot? Danville sits on the eastern edge of Illinois near the Indiana border, with a population just over 30,000. It used to be a manufacturing-heavy town. Factories, rail, logistics, the whole Midwestern greatest hits album. Then globalization did its thing, jobs thinned out, and the housing market never recovered its ego, which is great news for renters. The local economy today is a mix of healthcare, education, logistics, and government services. Not exciting, not collapsing. Just enough employment to keep the lights on and the landlords realistic. This is not a town where property owners think they're sitting on future equity. They're sitting on vacancies, and they act accordingly. Living in Danville feels aggressively normal. You've got grocery stores that actually stock things, hospitals that work, roads that exist, and neighbors who don't pretend they're in a startup pitch. Weather? Classic Midwest. Summers are humid. Winters are cold enough to remind you that coats are not optional. Wind shows up uninvited and overstays. Spring smells like wet pavement and hope. Animals? Birds, squirrels, and the occasional raccoon that has clearly figured out the trash schedule. Infrastructure? Old but functional. Think needs updates, not call an engineer immediately. Shopping? Walmart-level practical, you'll live. Why is it this cheap? Because population growth stalled. Because young people leave. Because it's not near a major metro. And because no one online is romanticizing it. And here's the part that sneaks up on you. Danville isn't depressing, it's just unambitious. The town knows exactly what it is and isn't apologizing for it. There's a quiet dignity to that. You won't be entertained nonstop. You won't feel stimulated, but you also won't feel hunted by rent. If you work remotely, are semi-retired, or just need a place where housing costs don't dominate every life decision, Danville delivers something rare: predictability, predictable expenses, predictable routines, predictable peace. The catch? If your identity depends on being somewhere exciting, this place will expose you. But if your goal is stability under $500, Danville doesn't blink. Number 7. Brownsville, Texas. Brownsville is the plot twist ending to this list, the one that makes people pause and say, wait, Texas? Yes, Texas. And yes, rent under $500 is still possible here, quietly, selectively, and without apology. Brownsville sits at the very southern tip of Texas, right on the border with Mexico, where the Gulf air is thick, the tacos are elite, and the cost of living feels like it missed the last 3 inflation meetings. Population-wise, it's not small, over 185,000 people, which already breaks the mental model of what cheap rent is supposed to look like. This isn't a dying town, that's the weird part. It's growing, slowly, steadily, on its own terms. The economy here is driven by healthcare, education, international trade, logistics, and government jobs. Add cross-border commerce into the mix, and you've got a constant flow of money that somehow hasn't translated into insane rent, mostly because wages remain modest and outside hype never fully arrived. Why is it still cheap? Because Brownsville is geographically isolated from the rest of Texas. Because it's hot, relentlessly hot. Because it's culturally distinct in a way that scares off people who want familiar, and because it doesn't perform for outsiders. Living in Brownsville feels different from everywhere else on this list. It's vibrant without being chaotic, lived in without feeling worn down. You hear Spanish everywhere. You smell food constantly. The town feels awake in a way that contradicts the price. Weather check. Summers feel like you're living inside a warm towel. Winters are basically a rumor. Animals, stray, dogs, birds, and the occasional iguana looking like it pays taxes. Infrastructure? Better than expected. Roads, hospitals, shopping. This is not a rural survival test. Shopping is solid. Food is exceptional. Community is strong, and rent? Still hovering in ranges that feel illegal in 2026. Now the catch. Jobs don't pay much. Career acceleration is limited unless you're in specific fields. And if you need seasonal variety, you'll miss it because it's hot again. Always. But if you're remote, retired, bilingual curious, or just tired of freezing while paying $1,800 for the privilege, Brownsville feels like a financial loophole that somehow hasn't closed. This is the kind of place where you stop budgeting aggressively because you don't have to anymore, where rent becomes background noise instead of the main character in your life. And that's the real luxury. Under $500 in Texas. Yeah, no one saw that coming. So, yeah, rent under $500 isn't extinct. It's just hiding in places the internet stopped paying attention to. None of these towns are perfect. Every single one has a reason it's cheap. Weather that humbles you. Job markets that don't care about your LinkedIn bio. Vibes that won't impress your group chat. But here's the trade-off. Peace, margin, and a life where rent isn't the main character. If you'd rather be financially calm than socially impressive, these places start to look less cheap and more strategic. Like the video if this list lowered your blood pressure. Subscribe if your rent has been committing crimes, and comment which town surprised you most because someone out there is paying triple for less. See you in the next one. See you in the next one. See you in the next one.